While we're on this topic about Africans and genealogy in Louisiana, I wanted to mention in colonial Louisiana records, especially during the colonial period, during the American period, everything started to change. But during the colonial period, almost every single time I open up a succession or an active sale or transfer or court case that's involving a planter, someone who owned a plantation, I see slaves identified by their African ethnicities and their physical descriptors. So not all Africans look the same. I've seen some identified as Grif, Milat, born in Africa. And some of those ethnicities we see are like some of the many ethnicities we see recurring in Louisiana records include especially Senegal, Wolof, Congo. Those three, I would say, are the major ones. Then after we have Kisi, Hausa, Nago, Bombara. And you even see that during the French period, the early French period, 1699 to 1762, there's a larger number of slaves that are coming from like Senegal, Mali, Gambia, for example, with some Congo. But during the Spanish period, 1762, 1803, you see a huge uptick in slaves coming from Central Africa. Congo is the biggest by far. But be careful what you think you can interpret from the way that some of these slaves are described ethnically in records. They're not always ethnicities. So like Congo is a huge mass of land that covers the Congo River Basin. Senegal is a whole river, and you have all sorts of ethnicities along that river. Sometimes in the records, when we see de Nation Senegal or de Nation Congo, they're not referring to ethnicities per se. They could be sometimes also referring to where the slave traders, the négriers, we call them in French, purchased the slaves, where the slave comptoir was. So be careful what you think you can interpret from some of these records, but be sure to look at like a pattern of the records, and that should give you more clues about the ethnicity. One time I was researching the Rini family in Lafayette Parish years ago, and they descend from a slave that belonged to an Acadian family, the Trahons, René Traon. And René had a slave named Venus that he presumably fathered children with. These children, the mother consistently identified as Negress. In records, the children consistently identified as Milat. He provided for their freedom in the 1790s. I forget the exact date. But when I tracked Venus in records up until the point when she became a Traon slave, I found a record that described her physique, and it talked about ethnic markers on her body. Now, the interesting thing is that her children most frequently used the last name René, which was obviously the first name of their previous owner, but possibly also their father, René Traon. But some of the grandchildren, I'm thinking two in particular, and one especially, who set up shop somewhere between current-day Broussard and Lafayette, the city, in Lafayette Parish. Francois started using the last name Senegal. Now, in the early records of Venus, where it describes her ethnic marking on her body and things like that, it does not say that she's Senegal, de Nation Senegal, but it does describe her ethnic markings on her body. So there are all sorts of like clues like that when you really dig. Research takes time, sometimes years, but when you really dig, you can find gems like that. And when you look at like the bigger picture of what was happening over multiple generations, especially the name surname tradition within the family, and also forename traditions, first names, you can get some clues about what the ethnic origins of the people were. So, because Francois started using Senegal as a last name, that's probably a big clue that Venus was from somewhere along the Senegal River in West Africa. Pretty damn cool. Louisiana research. By the way, see the same thing in Mexico, Puerto Rico, Brazil, all over the Americas. Um, Louisiana, as far as the United States is concerned, probably has the richest details in terms of the ethnicities of slaves, but doesn't mean that Louisiana is the only one. I'm sure there are others out there too. Florida, Virginia, and so on and so forth. Keep up the research.